One of the things that struck me as I read today's gospel is that these two followers of Jesus walking along the road didn't recognize the stranger who fell in with them. We don't know much about these two. Only one of them is even given a name by Luke. All we're really told is that they were followers, but they clearly weren't part of the inner circle of the 12. In any event, here they are, followers of Jesus. They had believed in the new life he had promised them. Their hearts were filled with joy and anticipation as they looked forward to hearing more of his word and to being witnesses again and again to his good works, to his miracles. Fed in body, mind, and spirit by their fellowship with Jesus and with other believers, their lives had become filled with a new joy. They thought it would go on forever. But that was then. Now, all their hopes and dreams were as dead as Jesus. The events of the past few days, ending with the crucifixion and burial of Jesus, had beaten every last shred of hope out of them. They thought there was nothing left to do but get out of Jerusalem and go to another place, maybe to pick up the pieces of their former lives and to begin again, to turn their backs on all that had seemed so promising and hopeful and walk the 7 miles on that road to Emmaus. Maybe disappointment blinded their eyes and their hearts to the truth. In Jerusalem, they had learned the devastating news about Jesus' death. Despite having heard about the women and other disciples reporting that Jesus was still alive, they continued to focus on his death. They had hoped he was the one to bring redemption to the oppressed and subjugated people of Israel, but Cleopas and his friend concluded that he wasn't the one. They didn't understand how he could be alive or how the transformation of life that Jesus had begun could continue. For them, it was still Good Friday. So they started out, the two of them, walking as they went and talking as they walked and going over and over the same ground, as if saying it one more time would change the outcome. Don't we all do that? If we've lost something, don't we keep revisiting the same spot, thinking that if we just go there often enough, the lost item will somehow miraculously reappear? As they do this, a stranger meets them on the road. It's Jesus, but their hearts are so full of defeat and so devoid of faith that they don't recognize him. Why is that? Had his appearance really changed all that much? Now here you have to imagine what had happened to Jesus himself. He had been hideously tortured to death and then buried. People often talk about Jesus as though his death had been followed immediately by his resurrection. But that's not what the Gospels report. Jesus lay in the tomb for 3 days. That means that his body, like everyone else's, had started to decay. Whatever we do or say, however learned we are, however many our friends, or how great our wealth, sooner or later, we all have that same experience. In that we are all alike, and Jesus has shared that experience with us. We don't know, and we're not told, whether the stranger's physical appearance was like or unlike their memory of Jesus' appearance. All we're told is that they, like many others, didn't recognize Jesus when he appeared. Then, when this stranger asks what they're talking about, they can't believe that he doesn't know all that's happened. Where has he been? And so they tell it all one more time. They even tell him about the empty tomb, how some women had seen a vision of angels who said that Jesus wasn't dead but was alive. But still, they said to the stranger, no one had seen him. So maybe the women had just heard what they wanted to hear. When they'd finished their story, the stranger chided them. "Weren't you listening when he told you how all of this must come to pass? Don't you know how, from the beginning of time, the prophets had foretold exactly what has just happened, that the Messiah must suffer before he enters his glory?" As he recites Scripture to them, going all the way back to the time of Moses, they're so taken in by his words that when they reach Emmaus, they don't want to let him go. They want to hear more, and so they invite him to stay with them. He agrees, and as they sit down to supper, the strangest thing happens. A guest in someone else's home, Jesus becomes the host. He picks up the bread, he blesses it, he breaks it, and he gives it to them. And in that simple act, something they might have seen him do time and again, their eyes are opened, and they know with certainty not only who he is, not only that this is indeed Jesus, but they also know that all he had said to them was true. It was like Mary and the tomb. Jesus had only to speak her name, to call out to her in the same way he always did, with the same familiar voice and inflection, and she knew immediately who he was. For Cleopas and his friend, their doubt and despair were forgotten. They were so renewed in faith, so excited, so happy, that they ran all the way back to Jerusalem to tell others the good news. If Jesus was disappointed in the disciples and all the others who deserted him at the end, who in the midst of their despair and disillusionment chose to take the road to Emmaus rather than stick it out by his side, we never hear about it. One of the most wonderful things to come out of the resurrection is that we learn this about Jesus. No matter how bad things become for us, no matter where we go to hide ourselves when the world gets to be too much for us, even if we lose our faith for a time, he'll come to be with us. He won't ask us for explanations. We won't have to justify our position, and there will be no recriminations. He will simply meet us as we walk, each of us, along our own road to Emmaus. It may be in a shopping mall where out of frustration we're buying something we don't really need, retail therapy. Or it may be in a car that's taking us away from those things we can't any longer endure. Or it may actually be on a road as we try to walk or to jog off the results of that recent test that took us completely by surprise. Whatever route we take when we just can't take it anymore, Jesus will meet us there. Even though it's us who are going away, he is always faithful. The wonderful truth of this story is that God uses everybody to proclaim God's kingdom, not only when we're being good and faithful and true, but even in our moments of waywardness and faithlessness as well. Just as he made himself known to the two men walking along the road, and then used them to make his story and the news of his resurrection known to the world, so he comes and stands beside us in our moments of despair, calling our name, waiting for us to recognize him, to realize again the truth of his words, to be renewed in faith so that he can use us again. It really is surprising how in the various accounts nobody recognizes Jesus immediately. They think he's a gardener, a stranger, some even think a ghost. But at some point, a familiar gesture is there again, and his friends know he's there with him. Absence and presence are touching each other. The old Jesus is gone. They can't be with him in the same way, but the new Jesus, the risen Lord, is there more intimately than ever. In countless ways, Jesus comes among us, never demanding, but patiently waiting for us to open our eyes and see him. It may happen as we stretch forth our hands in prayer It may happen in the reading of Scripture or in listening to a friend. It may come as we walk along a road. Or, like Cleopas and his friend, it may be in the breaking of bread. He's there. We have only to be willing to have our eyes opened in faith so that we can see the risen Christ for ourselves, so we can feel His presence and His peace as they surround us. The gift of Emmaus waits for you and me. Wherever we are on that road, our call is to be ready so that our eyes can be opened and we can recognize Him in all His glory. And then, renewed, run to tell others the good news.